The hinge on this box has not turned in 3 years, and it screams when I force it. Frozen galvanized steel. January. First light. There is an empty wasp nest in the top corner, and the flag is rusted upright. Box 41. Ridge Loop, Route 2. I put mail in this box with my own hand for 44 years, and I never once opened it. A carrier does not open boxes. Today, I am a 70-year-old man with a pair of bolt cutters and 11 days before my family expects me to swear under oath that a living person has been receiving this mail. He has not. And I know it. And I can prove it. And the proof is not fingerprints or bank records. The proof is that in 44 years, nobody ever tried to sell that man anything. My name is Ellis Booth. I carried Route 2 out of Verlo, Nebraska for 44 years. 187 miles, 412 boxes. I am grateful you are here this morning. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Let me be honest with you before I go on. This is a work of fiction. Verlo is not on any map of Nebraska. The people in it are invented, and the voice you are hearing is generated with artificial intelligence. Nobody real is being accused of anything. But I want you to sit with the machinery of it anyway, because the machinery is not invented. A signature is the cheapest thing in the world to want from an old person, and the most expensive thing in the world for them to give. Somewhere tonight, somebody is sliding a page across a kitchen table toward a parent and saying the word routine. And that parent is going to sign it, because the alternative is looking at their own child and saying, "I do not believe you." That is what the whole thing runs on, not greed, manners. Stay with me and I will lay it out in order, with the dates and the box numbers and the dollar figures exactly as they were. Now, let's begin. Verlo has 800 people and a grain elevator you can see from 11 miles out. My father hauled cream. I took the carrier exam in 1979 at 23 years old, and I drove Route 2 until they made me stop in 2023. My wife Nadine has been married to me for 47 years. She is 68. She runs the library 2 afternoons a week, and she is the only person in this story who never once let me doubt my own mind. We have one son. Wendell is 46. He is the county attorney for Halstead County, and he is married to Corinne, who sells real estate out of an office on Main with her own face on the window. And then there is Merle. Merle Kessler is Nadine's older brother. He is 79. He was postmaster of Verlo from 1976 until 2009, and he is the man who gave me Route 2. My children called him Uncle Merle. I called him the best boss I ever had. I want you to hold on to that sentence, because I'm going to have to take it back later. You may not think there is a craft in carrying mail. There is. After about the 4th year, you stop reading addresses and start reading houses. You know that the Dietrichs get seed catalogs in December, and the Ahmadis get 2 Urdu newspapers a month, and the widow Sofer has not gotten a personal letter since her sister died in '98. You know which boxes fill up on a Thursday. You know when somebody is sick, because the pharmacy envelopes change shape. You know when somebody has lost a job, because the credit card offers double. You know when a marriage is over about 6 weeks before the town does. 412 boxes, and every one of them has a rhythm. And a route is nothing but rhythm. And a man who has driven the same rhythm for 44 years does not remember the boxes so much as he feels them. And in all those years, there was exactly one box on Route 2 that had no rhythm at all. Box 41. I retired in June of 2023, and it took me about a year to stop waking at 4:50 in the morning. Then, last October, Corinne came out to the house with a folder and a smile, And what was in the folder was a solar lease. 1,100 acres of Olenbeck ground on the north side of Ridge Loop, going under panels for 30 years at $4.9 million. That land had been in that name since 1994. The closing was set for the 6th of February, and there was one problem holding it up, which was that the title examiner in Lincoln had flagged something. A signature dated 2007 and a signature dated 2019 did not match, and the examiner wanted a residence affidavit from a disinterested party who could swear that Hollis Olenbeck had continuously occupied that property. And there was exactly one disinterested party in the state of Nebraska who had been to that address 6 days a week for 44 years. Wendell brought it to my kitchen on the 11th of November at 7 in the evening with a notary sitting in his car. My son put the page in front of me and said the word routine, and then he said it again, and I read it. It said that I personally observed indicia of continuous residential occupancy at Box 41 Ridge Loop during the period of my employment. I set it down and I said, "Son, I never saw a person at that house, not one time in 44 years." Wendell smiled the way you smile at a child who has said something charming and wrong. He said, "Dad, he is a recluse. That is what a recluse is." And I said the thing that started all of it. I said, "Then who was he a recluse from?" Because he never bought anything either. 3 days later, Corinne had us over. 14 people. Somewhere between the ham and the pie, she started telling a story about how her father-in-law had gotten so mixed up lately that he could not even keep his own route straight anymore. And she said it warm, and she laughed, and everybody laughed with her, and a woman across from me touched my sleeve. 44 years, 187 miles. I could drive that route backwards in the dark with the headlights off and tell you which mailbox was coming by the sound the gravel made under the tires. But you cannot say that at a dinner table without sounding exactly like the man they have already described. So I looked at my plate. If you have ever sat at a table while somebody explained you to a room in the third person, you already know the temperature of that moment. And you know that the worst part is not the humiliation. The worst part is that some small part of you starts checking. Merle was the one who stood up for me. He always was. He put his hand on the back of my chair and told the whole table that Ellis Booth had the best memory in Halstead County and that he would take my word over a computer. And I was grateful. And here is the thing I want you to file away, because it took me 2 more months to understand what I was actually looking at. Whenever the Olenbeck name came up in a room, Merle did the same 3 things. He squared the edges of whatever paper was in front of him. He tapped it twice on the table, the way a postmaster settles a stack. And he smiled with his lower teeth showing. I had watched that man do that for 30 years, and I had always read it as tidiness. It was not tidiness. It was a man checking that his stack was still square. So let me tell you what I actually remembered about Box 41, because that is the whole case. The house sits 900 feet back off Ridge Loop behind a windbreak of Austrian pine, and from the road you can see the roofline and one upstairs window and nothing else. In 44 years, I never saw a vehicle move on that lane. I saw tire tracks, always fresh, always the same width, always coming from the Westfield Road and not from the county road. The mail was steady and it was thin. Government envelopes, Farm Service Agency, crop insurance, county treasurer, 1 bank statement a month out of Grand Island. Every 3 or 4 weeks the box would be empty when I got there, cleaned out overnight. It was a perfectly ordinary rural box in every single way except one. And the one is the reason I would not sign that affidavit. Nobody ever tried to sell that man anything. In 44 years, I did not put one piece of standard rate advertising mail in Box 41. Not a grocery flyer, not a seed catalog, not a coupon packet, not a carpet cleaning offer, not one of those Medicare mailings that bury a man of 70 alive. Not a political postcard in 22 election cycles. I want you to understand what that means, because most people never think about it. Junk mail is not random. It is a residue. It means somebody once bought something, joined something, registered a warranty, gave a phone number at a checkout counter. Every living address in this country leaks that residue, and it comes back at them forever. It is the exhaust of being a person. Box 41 had no exhaust, which meant that whoever was inside that house had not bought a single thing in 44 years. And no living human being does that. There was a second thing, and it is smaller, but it is worse. In 44 years, I never once collected outgoing mail from that box. Not one letter, not a bill payment, not a Christmas card, not a return envelope. The flag rusted upright in about 2002, and nobody ever put it down because nobody ever put it up. And there is a third thing I only put together later. Route 2 runs through open country, and the plows come through hard. In my time on that road, I watched 31 boxes get taken out by snowplows, some of them twice. Box 41 sat on the same cedar post from 1979 to the day I retired. It was never hit. Not once in 44 years, on a corner where the plow swings wide. Somebody was maintaining that box. Somebody was making sure that post stayed standing. That is not a recluse. That is upkeep on a piece of equipment. Now here is where a lot of men lose it, and I nearly did. Everything in me wanted to put that page back in my son's hand and tell him what I have just told you. And here is exactly what would have happened. My son, the county attorney, would have looked at his wife. His wife would have said, in that warm voice, "The dad has a story about junk mail now." And within a week, somebody would have used the word evaluation. That is how it gets done. Not with lawyers, with concern. So I did what 44 years on a gravel road teaches you. A route is a rhythm, and you never find the wrong house by staring at it. You find it by driving the whole line and noticing what is missing. So I told my son I would think about it. I let my voice go slow. And on the 22nd of November, I started driving my own route again. And this time, I was not delivering anything. Let me stop right here, because we have come to the first door, and I want to know you are still with me. In a few minutes, I am going to tell you what I found out about Hollis Ollenbeck. Before I do, put your guess in the comments, because I want to see the split. Type 1 if you think Hollis Ollenbeck never existed at all and the name was invented out of nothing. Type 2 if you think he was a real man who died a long time ago and somebody kept using his name. Type 3 if you think he was real and was still alive somewhere the whole time. I read these. It is the only way an old man at a kitchen table knows somebody is awake out there with him. And again, plainly, this is a fictional story told with a synthetic voice, so nobody here needs your worry, only your attention. Put your number down and come on with me, because what I found in the courthouse basement was worse than any of the three. The Halstead County Assessor's Office is in the basement of the courthouse, and the woman who runs it, Dolores Witt, has known me since I carried her mother's mail. I told her I was doing family history, which was almost true. The 1,100 acres went to Hollis Ollenbeck on the 9th of March 1994 at a tax sale for $62,000. The purchaser signed in person, and no mortgage was ever filed against that ground. Not once in 32 years, which for 1,100 acres of Nebraska farm ground is close to impossible. Land that size borrows. It borrows every spring and pays back every fall, and every one of those loans leaves paper. This ground had never borrowed a dollar because it had another kind of income. The Federal Farm Payment Database is public, which almost nobody knows. Between 1994 and 2024, the Ohlenbeck operation collected $3,140,000 in conservation, disaster, and price loss payments. 30 years of federal money, 4 to 6 checks a year, addressed to Box 41, Ridge Loop, which I put in that box with my own hand. I sat in my truck outside the library and did the arithmetic a man does not want to do. Somewhere between 11 and 12,000 pieces of mail. I had been the delivery mechanism for a 30-year fraud, 6 days a week, the entire time. So I did what anybody does. I looked at the person standing closest to the money. Corinne had the listing. Her commission on $4.9 million was not small. She was the one who had brought the folder to my house, and she was the one who had explained me to 14 people over a ham dinner. For 11 days, I worked on my daughter-in-law. I got into the office computer on a Saturday while she was at a showing, which I am not proud of. And what I found was that Corinne Booth is a hard, hungry woman who counts other people's land in her sleep. And that is all she is. She had never met Hollis Ohlenbeck. She had never been down that lane. She had taken the listing in August from a farm management company in Kearney, and she believed exactly what everybody in Halstead County had believed since before she moved here, which is that there is a hermit behind the pines who does not come out. She had written to the title examiner 4 times trying to get around needing my affidavit at all because she was worried about upsetting me. I read that email twice. I had spent 11 days building a case against a woman whose actual crime was bad manners at a dinner table, which put me on my son. And I will be straight with you about this part. Wendell had brought me the page. A county attorney is the one office in a place like this that can make a piece of paper true. He had the training to know what an affidavit does, and the standing to make sure nobody looked twice. He had grown up 4 miles from that lane and had never once asked me a single question about Box 41. And after I noticed that silence, I could not stop hearing it. For 9 days, I believed my son had done this. I sat in the church parking lot on a Sunday working out how I would say it to Nadine. Then I put the dates in a line, which is what I should have done first. The deed was recorded on the 9th of March, 1994. My son was born in 1980. He was 14 years old, in the 8th grade at Verlo Public, the shortest boy in his class. This thing was 32 years old before he ever passed the bar. And then I found the piece that took the last of the wind out of me. Wendell had written the title examiner on the 3rd of December asking whether the closing could be moved to spring. He had tried to slow it down and had not told me because he did not want to worry his father. So now I had a thing that started in 1994 that required somebody with authority in that year and that had run for 3 decades without one single person in a town of 800 noticing. And I finally asked myself the question I should have asked on the 11th of November. Who could keep an address alive for 32 years? Not a farmer, not a lawyer, not a realtor. There is exactly one job on this earth where you can decide, quietly and permanently, what happens to every piece of paper that goes to an address. You can hold the standard rate mail out of a box. You can pull a change of address before it processes. You can make sure a route goes to a carrier who follows the manual and never asks. You can make an address into a machine. And that job in Verlo, Nebraska, from 1976 until 2009, belonged to one man. I did not call the sheriff, and I did not call my son. On the 4th of January, I called the Postal Inspection Service in Omaha, which is a number I had known my whole working life and had never once dialed. And I got a woman named Yolanda Reese, who has been an inspector for 19 years. She was polite, the way people are polite to old men on the telephone. I could hear her typing something else while I talked. I gave her the deed and the payment total and the mismatched signatures, and she said, without any unkindness, that title people find signature problems constantly, and that this sounded like a civil matter. And then I said, "Inspector, I want to tell you one more thing, and then I will let you go. In 44 years, I never put one piece of advertising mail in that box." The typing stopped. There was about 4 seconds of nothing on that line. Then she said, "Say that again." That is the sentence that turned it, and I want to explain why, because it explains what my 44 years were actually worth. To me, it was one detail out of 1,000. To a postal inspector, it is a signature. Standard rate mail is bought in bulk against commercial lists, and those lists are built from purchases and registrations and every other transaction a living person makes, and they never let go. An address that is truly occupied by a human being for 3 decades and generates 0 commercial mail is not unusual. It is not rare. It does not happen. Yolanda Reese told me later that in 19 years she had never had a member of the public hand her that observation, because the only people on Earth who would ever notice the absence of junk mail are the ones who have carried it. She drove up from Omaha on the 6th of January and sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours. Second door, and this one is bigger than the first. In a minute, I am going to tell you what Inspector Reese found when she pulled the record on that name, and after that, I am going to tell you who built the whole thing. Give me your guess first. Type 1 if you think it was my son, the county attorney. Type 2 if you think it was somebody at the bank or the farm management company. Type 3 if you think it was somebody inside the post office. And type 4 if you have already worked out who I am about to name and you are ahead of me. And if you are, I do not blame you, because I was 70 years old and had known him for 51 years, and I still did not see it until a woman from Omaha said his name out loud in my own kitchen. Same reminder, this story is fiction and this voice is synthetic. Put your number in and stay close. Here is what Reese found in 11 days, and it was not what either of us expected. Hollis Olenbeck was real. He was not a name somebody made up. He had a Social Security number issued in Texas in 1951. He had 13 years of reported wages between 1971 and 1984. He had a Nebraska driver's license that was renewed in person in 1988 and never again. He had a hunting permit from 1979. He was born on the 2nd of April, 1935, which made him 91 years old this spring. Every piece of that man was genuine, which is exactly why the whole thing had held for 32 years. You cannot break an identity that was never fake. And that is the moment the floor went out from under me. Because if Hollis Olenbeck was a real man, then there had been a real man at the end of my route, and I had never once tried to find out anything about him. He came up from Del Rio, Texas in the spring of 1971, 24 years old, and hired on with the Randstad outfit on Ridge Loop. He stayed 23 years. Old Bud Randstad let him live in the tenant house behind the pines, and by all accounts, he was quiet. He was good with cattle. He did not drink, and he did not go to town. He had one sister, Isabel, who stayed in Del Rio. When Bud Randstad died in 1988, the place went sideways, and the taxes went unpaid for 6 years. And by 1994, Hollis Olenbeck was 59 years old, living alone in a tenant house on ground that was about to be sold out from under him, with no family in the state and no idea in the world what a deed was. He was not a target because he was rich. He was a target because he was a real, documented, breathing American man that nobody on this earth was going to come looking for. On the 19th of February, 2007, an ambulance was called to a private residence on Ridge Loop for a man in his early 70s having a stroke. Reese found the run sheet in the county archive in about 40 minutes. He was taken to Grand Island for 11 days and discharged into the care of a family member. There is no family member. 9 days later, a man was admitted to Fenwick Meadows Care Center in Council Bluffs, Iowa, under the name Hal Kessler, listed as the uncle of the responsible party. Private pay, paid by cashier's check every quarter for 19 years. $241,000 in 19 years. Never late, never a family visit recorded, never a phone call logged. And that is when I understood the shape of what I had been driving past 6 days a week. They did not need him gone. A dead man cannot hold a deed. They needed him alive and unable to say his own name. So they kept him. For 19 years, they kept a man alive in a bed in Iowa because his heartbeat was load-bearing. Merle's water heater has been my job since about 1990, along with his sump pump, his gutters, and anything else in that house that requires a ladder. So, on the 24th of January, I went over and fixed a thermocouple that did not need fixing. And while he was upstairs on the phone, I went through the shelves along the south wall of his basement. Paint cans, a tackle box, 30 years of Nebraska football programs. And on the bottom shelf, behind a case of motor oil, there was a Folgers can with a plastic lid. Inside it, standing on edge, held together with a rubber band that had gone to powder, were 11 Christmas cards. Every one of them addressed in the same hand to Hollis Olenbeck, Box 41, Ridge Loop, Verlo, Nebraska. Postmarked Del Rio, Texas. 1994, 1995. Every year through 2005. None of them opened. I want you to understand what I was holding, and I want you to understand it the way I did, standing on a concrete floor next to a water heater I had broken on purpose. I delivered those, every single one of them. I drove those 11 envelopes out Ridge Loop on 11 December mornings with my own hands, and I put them in that box, and I felt good about it. Because a carrier likes a Christmas card. A woman in Del Rio wrote to her brother every year for 11 years, got nothing back, wrote again anyway, and in 2006, she stopped. Reese found her later. Isabel Olenbeck Cruz died in Del Rio in 2019 at the age of 81. In her obituary, it says she was preceded in death by her brother Hollis. She spent the last 13 years of her life believing he was dead and grieving him. And he was 2 states away in a bed, being paid for with the money from his own land. I drove to Council Bluffs on the 28th of January with those 11 cards on the passenger seat. Fenwick Meadows is clean, and it smells like all of them smell. Reese had arranged it. He is 91, and he has global aphasia, which means the words go in and nothing comes back out. He is a small man with enormous hands, hands like a lifetime of wire and cattle, and they were folded on top of the blanket. I sat down and I told him my name, and I told him I carried his mail. Nothing moved in his face. So I opened the first card and I read it to him. Merry Christmas, Hollis, from your sister. We had rain in October. Tio Beto passed in June. Please write. I read all 11. It took about 40 minutes. Somewhere around the 7th one, his right hand came off the blanket and lay open on the sheet, palm up, the way a hand does when it is waiting to be handed something. I put the card in it. That is the only thing in this entire story that I would live through again. Driving home across Iowa, I finally let myself look at the last piece, which was me. Why me? Why was Ellis Booth on Route 2 for 44 years? When I came out of the exam in '79, there were two of us for one opening. The other man was Dwayne Sipple, who talked to everybody about everything. Merle put me on it and told me it was because I was steady. And that is exactly what it was. He did not pick a man who would look the other way, because a man who looks the other way knows there is something to look at, and a man like that can be bought and can therefore be sold. He picked the one who would never look at all. He picked me because I was honest, and because I followed the manual, and because in 44 years I would put 11,000 pieces of federal mail into that box and never wonder about one of them. That is the part that has cost me the most sleep. He did not use my weakness. He used the best thing about me. I had 13 days from Council Bluffs to the 6th of February, and I spent them being precisely the man Corinne had described over the ham. I let Wendell explain the affidavit to me 2 more times. I asked him twice what a notary was. I told them, on the 30th of January, that I had thought about it, and that I would sign, and that I wanted to do it at the closing with everybody there, because it felt like a family thing. Merle came out to the house that night to tell me he was proud of me. He sat at my table, and the Ohlenbeck name came up, and I watched him square the edges of the tax folder in front of him, and tap it twice on the wood, and smile with his lower teeth. 51 years I had been reading that as a tidy man being tidy. It is a strange thing to sit across from somebody and finally see them. The 6th of February, 2 in the afternoon, the conference room at Halstead County Title on Main Street. Sleet on the windows. Around that table were Corinne, Wendell, a notary named Pearl Gantz, 2 men from the Solar Company, a lawyer from Lincoln on speaker, Nadine, and Merle Kessler, 79 years old, in the good gray coat he has worn to every funeral in this county. The affidavit sat in the middle of the table, with a pen laid across it. I came in 9 minutes late with my hat in my hands, and Corinne said, "There he is," and pulled out my chair. I picked up the pen. Everybody in that room leaned forward about an inch, and I have thought about that inch a great deal since. Then I set the pen down and I said, "Before I swear to anything in front of my wife, I want one thing said out loud in this room. Merle, tell these people the last time you saw Hollis Ohlenbeck in person." He squared the papers. He tapped them twice. He said, "Ellis, I don't believe I ever met the man." And I said, "That is what I needed." And I took a photograph out of my coat pocket, taken by Inspector Reese at 9 o'clock that morning in a care center in Council Bluffs, Iowa, of a 91-year-old man sitting up in a chair by a window with a Christmas card from 1998 on the table beside him. I laid it on the affidavit, and I said, "You wanted a proof of life? There it is." The room did not make a sound. The lawyer from Lincoln said hello twice into the speaker and then hung up. The door opened, and Yolanda Reese came in with 2 inspectors and a deputy sheriff, and she read the name Hal Kessler off the Fenwick Meadows admission record and asked Merle Kessler whether he would like to explain the coincidence. And my brother-in-law, who taught me to case a route, who carried my son on his shoulders at the county fair in 1985, who stood up at a dinner table in November and told 14 people that Ellis Booth had the best memory in Halstead County, looked at me and did the only honest thing I ever saw him do. He squared the papers in front of him, he tapped them twice, and he said, "Ellis, I never thought you would open the box." Nadine went out the side door, and I did not follow her. And that was the right call. And it is also the thing I will answer for. Here is the ending in numbers. Merle Kessler was indicted in April on mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, conversion of federal program payments, and criminal neglect of a vulnerable adult, and pleaded in September to 14 years, which, at 79, is the rest of it. The government took the 1,100 acres. The solar lease died on the table on the 6th of February, and Corinne got nothing. And she still lives in this county, and we are civil. Wendell recused himself the same afternoon, and then drove out to my house and sat on my porch in the sleet and cried, which I had not seen him do since he was 9. The ground was sold in August, and after the government took what it was owed, $460,000 went into a conservatorship for Hollis Olenbeck, who has a court-appointed guardian now, and a caseworker, and a window that faces east. And in Del Rio, Texas, there is a headstone for Isabel Olenbeck Cruz that says she was preceded in death by her brother, and there is no fixing that. And I have stopped trying to think of a way. I go to Council Bluffs the first Tuesday of every month. He does not know me. That is not the point, and it never was. Nadine came with me in June, and she sat on the other side of the bed and held his hand and did not say anything for an hour. And on the drive home she said one sentence, which was, "My brother did this." I have thought a great deal about what I am guilty of. I stole nothing. I lied to nobody. And every single thing I did for 44 years I did correctly. And a man spent 19 years in a bed in Iowa because I was correct. That is not the same as innocent. It turns out there is a space between those two words, and it is a lot bigger than I ever knew. And I have been living in it since January. So let me say the thing I came here to say, and I am saying it to those of you who are 50, 60, 70, 80. When somebody puts a page in front of you and says the word routine, that is the word you should be afraid of. Not urgent, routine. Urgent makes you careful, and routine makes you polite. And when your own family starts explaining you to a room in the third person while you are sitting in it, do not argue and do not sign. Just write down the date and keep the page. But here is the part I did not expect to be standing here saying. The other thing you have to watch is your own goodness. I was used for 32 years, not because I was foolish and not because I was old, but because I was reliable. And somebody worked out that a reliable man never looks. If you have spent your life doing your job correctly, then somewhere in your life there is a box you have never opened. Go open it. You will most likely find nothing. I would rather you found nothing. If any part of this landed on you, tell me your story in the comments. Tell me about the page somebody called routine, or the relative who started talking about you in the third person, or the thing you drove past for years without ever once wondering about it. I read every one of them. Hit that like button, send this to somebody over 50 before somebody hands them a pen, and subscribe with the bell so the next one finds you. And one more time, honestly, so nobody walks away confused. This is fiction. Verlo, Nebraska is not real. Ellis Booth is not a real man. And this voice is generated with artificial intelligence. But federal farm payment records are public, and anybody can look at them. Care facilities do accept private pay from people who never visit. And the quiet way one patient person can keep a name alive for 30 years is very, very real. Go open the box. Thank you for riding this route with me tonight.